Because I think there's certain techniques that you use, whether it's silence or sound or music, but also visually in terms of the camera movement.
Well, yeah, it's always a bit of an intuitive process to make a film. First of all, like you're drawn to a story or to some material, and in this case, it was us, Johannes and I. We went to school together, and then just being on vacation, taking walks, and talking about life. And while we were talking about life, he actually told me about one incident that happened at his sister's, who was a math teacher in school. That was pretty similar to this one. And then we talked about our time in school where we got frisked actually, and like in the very beginning of the scene, and then from there on, we started writing the script. At some point, we stripped ourselves off of the possibilities, meaning we said, let's just keep this in a school, and that was actually a breakthrough. And then we had that concept in every other department as well. So I would go to my DP and say, hey, let's really try to make this as simplistic as possible, as well as to my composer, where I would say, hey, just use, you can't use more than 4 classical instruments. And the production designer and the costume designer, they were like, I said to them, it's blue and shades of brownish, so or red, So I think there is great power when you strip yourselves off of possibilities for the creative process, and that's how this film came along.
Yeah, I was telling you earlier, we saw a number of films this year, and some made it into the festival, that kind of where schools become this contested space, like the politics and the social tensions of the outside world we see reflected inside the school. One of them is the Hungarian film Explanation for Everything. And so I was really intrigued by that as being a theme this year. But then I started to think about, like, what is the space of the school? And we do an architecture and film program. So I was wondering if you could talk about thinking about the architecture of this school and those spaces and the way in which the teachers and the students are moving through them or using them that contributed to the story.
We had a look at a lot of schools. We shot this film in Hamburg, Germany, and we tried to make it work in a school that's up and running. But no school would let us in their premises for 6 weeks, especially like a film set is like, it's like a big circus. And then we found this amazing school that is not being used anymore. Some real estate company bought it and was gonna tear it down, and we were the last ones to shoot something there. So that was quite a bit of luck, to be honest.
Yeah, but I mean, so could you talk a little bit about thinking then? You have this space, which is, there's an openness to it, of course, and the windows, like in the gym. But then there's, the hall shots or the classroom shots, which feel much more, or the teacher's lounge shots.
Yeah, most of it, like the teacher's lounge, we completely built in that building. Okay. Yeah, it was just an empty room, and what I wanted was doors that have where you can see through. Mm-hmm. That it's basically a bit like, we're trying to be transparent, and we're trying to be the New York Times or whatever, so that's how we made these rooms and doors, mm-hmm. and try to find angles where you could see what the other person in the other room is doing. Right. So that's why she looks a lot of times through glass. Right,
and also inside looking out regularly too.
Yeah, and if you film somebody looking at something behind a glass, mm-hmm. It's always this intuitive thing of a prison. Right. And prison was actually a big theme, like when we were thinking and dreaming about this, because like she can't leave the school, and we tried to kind of create this feeling of something where you're like stuck.
Right. More psychologically than physically, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Great. Well, we'd love for your questions, so please raise your hand if you have any. Right here.
So, like there's one scene where the kids are they call somebody a traitor, and there's a big deal made about, getting someone to give testimony or give evidence, whatever, point out somebody. Does that have a special, social code maybe in Germany based on what happened in East Germany?
Yeah.
And the reunification?
So you're talking about like the interrogation of the students that's starting at the beginning and the use of that. And
Yeah, absolutely. So this whole, for those who don't know, there has been, like in East Germany, there has been this thing where you would snitch on your neighbors and tell the police about them and try to make. And it's still to this day, there's one thing in Germany that really bugs me, and that's the metro. Because in every other country, like when you enter the subway, you just pass a thing, right? You put your card in there, and then you pass it. But in Germany, you can just enter without that turning thing. And how they control whether you have paid or not is by sending in civilians into the thing, and then saying, "All right, now we want to see your tickets," And I think that's always like you're kind of inviting people to just save money, and then you get them at a moment, and it's so embarrassing if you get caught because everybody sees it, and that's actually something that is part of Germany's history, and this whole tell us about your neighbor thing, and there's lots of things actually. It's not the only thing.
Right. Great. Another question? Right here?
Well, I was just going to say that in terms of the whole snitching thing, that has sort of become relevant culturally to the United States. So, for instance, in the state of Virginia, the governor there stated a snitch line for parents and students to call in and report their teachers for teaching something that might be Black or Native American history.
Or critical race theory, yeah.
So it's definitely relevant.
I gotta tell you, like, when we did the research for this project, like, oh man, teachers, really, it's chapeau. Like, everybody who picks up that profession deserves my like, all of my respect, because nowadays it's so hard to be a teacher, and there's so much pressure on them, and parents, like a little incident becomes a big thing because you have these WhatsApp groups and these helicopter parents and whatnots. And today I was like asked by a journalist, what would you like this film to be for audiences? And I said, there was this one moment in Germany where we had a screening with teachers as well as students, and then after the screening, one of the students stood up and said, "Hey, I want to thank you for this film because, like, we are so hard on our teachers, and this film shows what they go through." And and then the teachers started applauding, and that was just very, very cool, and I would want parents to watch this too, because there is so much pressure these teachers have to endure. And and when I did that research, I was just like blown away by what they have to deliver every day and every night. Like, you can basically work all day if you can't set a boundary.
Right.
Yeah.
Right here.
Is there a version of the film that did not end with that final shot of Oscar being carried away by
The question is if there's a version of the film that didn't end with that final shot of the police carrying Oscar out on the throne.
Well, yeah, it's funny that you asked that, because my producer and we had a bet going. Sorry. So he asked me, like, he said, "Do you really want to shoot this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, let's shoot it. It's let's have material in the editing room." And he said, "You're not gonna use it. I'm telling you." And then it was €100 bet. And then we showed him the film. First time we showed it to him, first thing he says after the film, "I think I lost the bet." But the interesting thing was, I wasn't sure about it. I showed it to him, like I showed it to him the film like this, but I wasn't sure about this ending because it's actually in the grammar of the film, it's a shift of perspective, and it's also something that the film actually doesn't do. It's a comment, but we talked about it, and he said, "Why did you?" Like he was trying to convince me of it. He said, "Why did you write it in the screenplay, and why did you want to shoot it?" I said, "Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted it." And actually, I do know why I wrote it, and what the thing was. There is this book called Bartleby the Scrivener. I don't know if you've heard of it. Yeah, Bartleby the Scrivener by Herman Melville is a great book because it's about this scrivener who at some point decides to not do it anymore. He says, "I would prefer not to." And I was reading that book in my early 20s, and I remember, like, the guy doesn't take orders anymore from his boss. Then at some point he doesn't leave the premises of the place where he works. Then he's being removed from there to a prison. And in prison, he actually also refuses to eat. He just says, "I would prefer not to," and he dies. And his boss, who's like telling the story, it's a great novel. It's a great novel also because one thing, I didn't understand it, and I had to make up my own mind. But I remember the last sentence of it was, "Oh Bartleby, oh humanity." And when I was reading about the novel later, so I realized, okay, it's like resistance, and in saying no, there's actually great humanity. And when we talk about democracy, it's actually something somebody at some point had to bleed for, or had to give a sacrifice and had to say no. And that's why this kid to me is kind of a hero or a king. And yeah, that's why this shot is there. Short question, long answer.
That's a great answer there. Right here?
Yeah, I think before all the allegations were made, there was a scene in the teacher's lounge where somebody was taking money out of a piggy bank. And, I mean, were you trying to sow doubt into the minds of people by that particular thing, that activity?
Right, so the question is around the scene where, like, in the background, Čatak sees them taking the change out of the piggy bank, and kind of what that effect had, whether it was on the audience or clearly on the character as well, when she's not quite sure what she's seeing, but depends on how you're reading it.
Yeah, you don't know. She's like, it's basically that to me is a scene as a screenwriter, which is actually a bit functional because as a screenwriter, you're trying to direct her attention to the teacher's lounge, and you're not sure if that colleague is actually just getting back her change or actually taking something out of there. And that's why I never loved that scene, because it's always a bit, it feels functional to me, but sometimes you have to do these things in order to get what you want.
Great. Right over here.
I just had a question about the student newspaper. I think maybe from an American perspective, we have newspapers in schools that they have faculty advisors, and so it tends to be much more supervised. And I wonder if there was something specifically German about the idea that the students really would have that level of control so they could run the story.
So the question is about the student newspaper and the students' level of control over it.
Yeah, so that was actually another interesting story that we got to discover when we did our research. I didn't know that there are school newspaper championships in Germany. So there is even like awards, like the Pulitzer Award, for best new newspaper, and that's why it's a big deal. And we were talking to a bunch of school newspaper people who won that award previously. And they had all stories about, like, really rigid stories about their teachers and whatnot. So they aren't supervised, and they would never accept the supervision.
Great. Right here?
There are a lot of films about workplaces, schools, factories, hospitals, whatever, offices. And usually when there's one main character, or very frequently, if there's one main character, such as here, you see that teacher outside, I mean, the worker, outside of the workplace. You see them at home.
Yeah.
We don't see her at home, we don't see her going to the supermarket. The only time you see her outside of school is when she's trying to get her laptop back.
Yeah.
So I thought that really was good in that it didn't break the tension. If you saw her at home cooking dinner, it would not add anything really.
Yeah,
But
thank you.
It would break the tension, but there was no broken tension. So I appreciate that.
Thanks for saying and mentioning this, because I actually had to protect that idea in front of my financiers. They were like, are you sure we get to know this person enough? And my thesis was, it doesn't matter if she's a cat person or a dog person. It doesn't matter if she eats cheese or sausage in the morning. What matters is the decision she takes when she's under pressure. That's actually when you can see the character of a person. And that was my argument, and yeah, I'm glad we did it this way. Yeah, because yeah, okay.
Up here?
I was just wondering if you